I'm Brandon Smith, and I'm the workplace therapist. My entire purpose and passion in life is one singular thing, and that's to help you live a life free from dysfunction. And let's be honest, folks, dysfunction is everywhere. Our bosses, our coworkers, our neighbors, even that grumpy barista that pours your coffee. And sometimes, that dysfunction stares back at us in the face when we're getting ready in the mornings and we see ourselves in the mirror. Well, at the end of the day, life and work should not have to suck. The purpose of this show is to help you overcome those roadblocks in your life to help you realize the life you've always wanted. This is the Brandon Smith Show, and I'm your host, Brandon Smith, and the entire purpose of this show is one singular thing, and that is to help you live a life that much more free from dysfunction. And so today, our topic is an interesting one. We're going to go kind of high level. We're going to talk about more organizational challenges in the modern workplace today. Specifically, how do you take a workforce and make them more digital? So that could be everything from virtual workers, using more technology. How do you really take a modern workplace and bring it up to the digital age? Meaning you're going to have to get people to change behavior. And so my guest on the show is Christina Ambrose. Christina, how are you?
Doing great. How are you?
I am wonderful. I'm wonderful. And I'm excited to have Christina on here. And Christina and I were both talking before the show. Neither of us are proclaimed experts in this space, but both of us deal with it in different worlds. And so Christina, you wear a couple hats. So one of your hats is you work in a large publicly traded company dealing with this very same issue. So we'll chat a little bit about that. But your other hat is you're also an evening MBA student at Emory.
Yes.
So you have so much free time on your plate, don't you?
Yes, so much free time.
So we're gonna talk a little bit about this journey, and really the spirit of this is one big open conversation. Talk about the stuff we're seeing, talk about some of the challenges we're seeing, maybe try and solve some answers today. But as a listener, I want you to be thinking about what answers do you have, and please reach out to us, share them with us, because after all, this is a piece of a large conversation. So, Christina, before we jump into our topic today, tell our listeners a little bit about you. What's been your journey up to this point?
Sure. Well, thank you again for having me today. It's such an honor to be here. I'm excited to share the time with you. So prior to moving to Atlanta, I was kind of all over the place. Went to Vanderbilt University for my undergraduate and studied.
Like me?
Yes, like Brandon. Actually, we are very, very similar in our backgrounds. And studied in human and organizational development, and then went into the senior living industry in Nashville, Tennessee, with Brookdale Senior Living, and was with them for about almost 5 years. Then in 2015, my husband decided that he was getting his MBA at the time, but decided that we need to move away from Florida because of better opportunities elsewhere. So in December, he was offered a role with Home Depot, so we decided to pick up and move here from Florida. At the time when I moved here, I had no job. I took a risk leaving the organization I was with, trying to find something different. And in February, I networked through LinkedIn. This is also the power of networking. Was able to reach out to a former coach of mine from undergraduate school from Vanderbilt, and he just networked with them, kept in touch, and he was able to connect me with my current organization, and then which brings me today. Recently just got promoted at my.
Congratulations!
Thank you.
Nice big clap. Isaac's clapping too.
And on Monday I'll be starting a new position as a project coordinator to the chief people officer of my organization.
Super, super cool. Wow.
I'm very excited. And which then kind of brings me to this topic, because this, in my new role, we've talked about, how do we grow as an organization, and what are the, current, environment, what is the current landscape. And the topic of being digital is, swirling, in many meetings, and just a big goal for the organization.
So when it comes up in the meetings, what do people say about it? Do they say it like, oh, no, we have to do this thing? Or do they say it like, wow, this is where we need to go if we're really going to be able to be as nimble as we want to be?
I think most people are shocked how far behind, the organization is. That I think most people did not realize that certain technologies are available that can replace or streamline or make it more efficient at the workplace. Such as robotics have replacing literally manufacturing roles, or just being able to do it after hours, for efficiency and productivity perspective, or just machine learning, being able to have that in place so we can track XYZ. So a lot of those things I know that most firms are not doing, and I know that it's something that my organization is trying to get there. And the question is, well, how do you build that kind of culture? And how do organizations get there, I guess.
So it sounds like it's a lot of things. It's not only kind of technology that's available to make us more nimble as we just get stuff done, but even going further into artificial intelligence and robotics and other things that can do it for us.
Right. And what is the limit? Or is there a limit? I don't know.
It's a really good question. It's a really good question. So we can either talk about in terms of your organization or just what you've seen and heard. What's the starting place for that? Where do you start something like that when you're trying to make that shift in digital? What do you all start to talk about?
I think, one of the things is, really understanding what is out there. What are tech companies currently producing, putting out there, and what technologies are being adapted. And then I think one of the things now why we're pushing harder in that space is because the senior leaders saw how powerful it can be. Previously when they went out to the West Coast and did some, they did a quick seminar out there, and they just realized how powerful it can be and why are we not doing it? I really don't know if again, I'm not an expert, and I don't know, what is in the pipeline as of now, but I know that there's this sense of urgency to push and to get there, because, year over year, in my organization, the challenge of competition, new brands or new products coming out, is being digital a way to compete, better with competition? And is it a better way to help associates get things done quicker and more efficient, more effective? But then also striking the balance between the two. What is being overly, sometimes with the help of technology, you're overly stimulated, or you have no idea where to go first. So how should organizations then help us or help associates, strike that balance between being effective and being efficient as well? So.
Yeah. So I know you brought some questions. What would be a good starting place for this? Is there a question that's kind of really been on your mind? It's one that's worthy for us to kind of chew on a little bit?
Sure. I guess the big broad question, is, how do you build that digital culture? And, is there a specific definition, or is it industry standard definition of being digital? Because
it's a good question.
Because you and I, me seeing digital could mean, different, things to you, or, anywhere else, or anyone else. So, what does it mean for you to be digital, and how do you build that kind of culture?
Yes, I think one of the things that I know all organizations are still dealing with is the one place that I go to when I hear that comment and thought is virtual. So can we do things, can digital allow us to operate virtually and have us more flexibility? Or do we need to be in a physical space? And so I think that's one that we've all seen organizations kind of go back and forth on. So they'll make everybody virtual, then they'll pull everybody in, or they'll try a mix. I heard one senior leader tell me, she said, it's easy to create a culture of all virtual people. And it's easy to create a culture of all physically based people. It's almost impossible to create a consistent culture when you have partial virtual, partial physical, because you end up with two competing cultures. And that's a challenge. So I think there's part of that with digital is can it allow us to work more efficiently and even have more flexibility? Because I know how much time we waste just commuting.
Right.
I mean, you and I were talking about that today. When you drove to the studio and the amount of time it took you. I mean, living here in Atlanta, you can't go anywhere without it costing you 45 minutes to an hour. And so that's twice a day. That's lost time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the other element to digital is when it's done well, it preserves our most precious resource, which is time. I mean, I think that's really what we're trying to get. We're trying to steal back some time, but doing it in a way that doesn't cost us effectiveness. And I think that's a challenge. And then there's the challenge of people adopting it.
Mm-hmm.
So has that been something that you all talk about inside your organization? How do we get people to adopt it? Because it's one thing to identify the resources.
Right.
It's another thing to get people to use them.
Right, and I think that's also a very good question. Is how, it's a very good question because, how do you prepare your current existing associates, to cause that behavior to change, and also competing with recent graduates, who are more up, in the game in terms of technology. Then how do you help current associates? And also, let's face it, people don't like change. And then when you're trying to roll out a new technology, a new platform, that's, you're mandating, the entire organization to switch. That's also difficult a lot of times for folks who may not be that great with technology, that learning curve.
Yeah.
And then how do you help that person to perform at his or her 100%? When that person is a rock star at the workplace.
Yeah. And it's such a fine balance. It reminds me of the show I had my daughter on. My daughter's 15, almost 16. I think she's 36, but that's a whole other conversation. And when she ended the show with the life hacks, she ended up doing 2 life hacks instead of 1. The first one she said was, you need to put down the phone, put down the technology and really connect with another person and have a conversation. And she was really making a commentary on her generation and folks right out of college, because she said part of what's going to make her generation different than millennial generation is that she's grown up with technology and phones all the way through middle school, high school. So she says, I'm always connected.
Mm-hmm.
But not really, because I'm not having a conversation, a real conversation. I'm doing it via social media and technology. But then she added a second hack and she said, but older generation can really learn. There's a lot of technology out there that can make your life better, make it easier. So it sounds like there's this competing dynamic of we need to use technology to get smarter and better, but not so far that we're losing effectiveness because we're trying to do everything without actually talking to a person.
Right, which then brings into the idea of present being versus presence, because I can have a meeting with you right now, but because I'm so tied up on my phone, I'm present. My presence is here, but I'm not present in the moment to be totally engaged with you.
Yeah.
And again, it's how do you strike that balance? Because I don't know. I have no kids. I have no, just me and my husband and a dog. So I'm very selfish from that perspective. Yeah, I'm connected all the time. I'm present with my husband, but he's it. So how I'm thinking about family life and all that kind of things that will bleed into from technology from work or technology from other things. It's just so difficult to shut off.
Totally, and that's one of the. I hear that all the time. I heard it yesterday. I was doing a workshop. I asked the question, "What makes a great leader in terms of in your organization? A great communicator?" And big room of 130 people, seniorish leaders, and a lot of them said being able to be fully present. To your point, being able to put the phone down and be fully present with another person when they're interacting. That's really hard to do. So again, it begs this question of if we're going to go more digital and have that much more technology, it should be there to allow us to be more present, not create more distractions, which I think is one of the big challenges. How do we do that? I don't know. So when you think about now for your organization, and I know this is a totally unfair question, okay, Christina? I'm asking you a totally unfair question. So you could punt if you want to.
Okay.
Here's the question. If you were to look into the magic crystal ball and you were to see the biggest challenge that you think your organization is going to have going digital, what do you think it is? And knowing it's probably true for any organization that's a big corporation.
Yeah, I think, what you're asking is how do you get people to see, your side of the story, correct? So it's, how do you get the senior leaders to buy in? How do you shape their ideas? How do you shape, how are you able to sell, essentially selling this idea, the strategy that can provide growth for the organization. So, that's a great segue into my, one of the questions I had, in a publicly traded organization, specifically, how should the board of directors, play a role in this?
What role should there be? Okay,
Right.
all
And then how does that shape their strategy?
I got some thoughts on that.
Yeah.
Right after the break.
Yeah.
So we are going to take a quick break, and when we come back after the break, we're going to talk about that. What are other roles that other people can play, board of directors, leaders, to really make this change happen so our workplace can be that much more ready for the future. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Job plus the right culture plus the right boss equals workplace happiness. The number one reason people leave jobs is problems with their boss. A horrible boss can make us dread every Monday, but an amazing boss can make us so excited to work that we'd go in on weekends. Finding your perfect boss is not only possible, it's one of the most impactful steps you can take in crafting your perfect career. Visit theworkplacetherapist.com and click on guides to learn how to find and get your perfect boss, whether that means making the decision to move on or turning your current boss into the perfect leader you want them to be. Our bosses have so much influence over our work and our whole day. Working for the right boss alone can be a winning career strategy.
This is the Brandon Smith Show, and we are coming back from break. Welcome back, and we are talking today about the challenge of creating a more digital organization. In other words, using all the technology that's at our disposal to make us more efficient and effective, in theory. And there's a lot of challenges of that. You can go too far, you can do not enough, you got to bring people along. And the last question we talked about right before break that my wonderful guest, Christina Ambrose, pitched to me was, what's the role of the board of directors in terms of trying to get an organization to embrace digital and technology? It's an interesting question. I think naturally you'd want to say that the board should play a big role in that. The challenge is most board of directors are made up of leaders or retired leaders from other existing Fortune 500 companies. And so let me take a step back here a minute and just talk a little about how leaders at that level operate. So my experience has been that once someone hits about director level in any kind of large publicly traded company, that's when politics tends to start. And remember, just to be fair here, and this is not meant to be a disparaging statement, it's just more of an observation statement. Once a company gets to be about $3 billion in revenue, they morph into a government. There's a lot more politics, a lot more bureaucracy. It's just harder to move things. It means you got to be able to align a lot of stakeholders, and it becomes complicated. So not only does politics start at the director level, I also noticed that at the director level, people have to spend 10% more time communicating and not doing, and they have to start to slow down to bring more people along. And every level above that, it's another 10%, and you have to drive slower. So when you get to a senior, when you're at like the C level or in the board of directors, you'll see decisions made very, very slowly. Doesn't mean that that's bad. They're just slow decision makers because they want to evaluate all the options and bring a lot of people along. So I think that being said, it's okay to take time, but you got to make the decision. But the comment that I was going to make around this is the number one best way to help organizations make that move is bring in the perspective of customers, because that will change it more than anything else. If customers say you need to make this change, then senior leaders and board of directors will always listen. Anybody else says something, or even competitors do something, it may not move the needle. But if a customer or customers are making that happen, it's almost always going to help move it to the other side. So that's what I would say. Board of directors need to really be evaluating what's the customer landscape looking to grow into or move into, and how can this help us get there.
Got it. Then on the flip side, then how should the organization, select its, board of directors, to, in a way to be more digital?
Well, we talk about diversity and diversity and inclusion. I think that very much applies to board of directors. So I think if I was to wave my magic wand and create board of directors for organizations,
Yep.
it would involve, you absolutely would have senior leaders from different kinds of companies. But I would look at companies that are of different sizes. So I think here's the problem with most board of directors. They tend to be all senior leaders from all companies at the same size. So they're all, in terms of company size, those big corporations are like battleships. So it's all other captains of battleships. And battleships are great. Battleships don't move very fast. So I would get some captains of some yachts and some schooners and some smaller organizations. And then I'd also get some and look for some, so not only diversity in size and industry, but then of course diversity in perspective, men and women, different ethnicities, because you want that board of directors to really represent, it should represent and look like the future, not current state or past state. So that's my magic wand. It's a pretty lofty goal.
Yeah. That would be tough.
It would be tough, but you're talking about a really important thing. Big companies, lots of employees, lots of things at stake. So it's worthwhile to really be thoughtful and diligent about the board of directors that you select. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen today, but I think there's opportunity to make it better.
Well, then, you were saying, having more diverse, board of directors and whatnot, of all different sizes. And a lot of times, the really successful tech firms are of the leaders of the organization are fairly young. Do you think that big organizations, existing organizations, public traded, would be open to the idea of having somebody like, of that background and age and all those things considered
No.
as a board of director?
No, absolutely not. There's no way. There's no way someone who is, 55, 60 years old, who's kind of gone up through the ranks, is going to listen to a 35-year-old who's built a fast-growing tech business. Should they? Yes, absolutely. If they are humble enough and open enough, that's exactly who they should have on their board, as a voice. Not to say the board should look like that,
No,
but that should be a voice. Absolutely. But yeah, I'm cynical here. Okay, so I'm being a little bit cynical. But I would say no, they're not going to listen. They're not going to want to listen. But they should. The great leaders would. Great leaders would. Great leaders would recognize something that a mentor of mine always said: we all hold a piece of the truth. So they need more different puzzle pieces if they want to find truth. And getting people just like them, captains of these big battleships, you're missing out on a lot of speed. And smaller companies that are in that small to medium-sized space, they're moving fast. They're on growth curves. Mm-hmm. So it's worthy to say what are they doing that's getting them there, and going digital is a piece of that. They're typically either have that built in or that's part of their business model. So it's good to learn.
Got it. Well, I'm going to pivot a little bit
into
into a different, still around digital, but around the privacy debate. For a lot of organizations, organizations collect information on customers, consumers, employees, et cetera, et cetera. At what point is it too much? As of right now, I don't think there's much governance around, what companies should collect and can collect. Can collect. But at what point is it too much? Should organizations do it just because they can right now?
Oh gosh. Should they do it just because they can? It's a really good question. I would say, well, my natural reaction is not without permission from customers.
Of course.
But at the end of the day, what every company says, big ones in particular, but all of them say this, is the more data we get, the better, because you can leverage the data in so many different ways. You can sell the data, you can use it to get better insights if you know how to mine the data. So there's value in that. But I think you have to put some constraints around that and have customers sign up for that constraint. So to give an example of that, and it's no secret that my family and I go to Disney quite a bit. So we go to Disney a lot. And Disney is a master at gathering data. And now when you go to Disney, they you get a magic band. That's what you wear when you go into the parks. And loaded, it's just a little bracelet. And on it is loaded your room key, your park passes, all the fast passes you signed up for, your credit card.
That's awesome.
So you can just go up and just swipe it, and then that's that. And there's also a tracker on that, so they know where you are in the park. So they say the benefit of that is if you get a lost kid, they can find a kid like that. But they can also see exactly where you are, all your movements, and that allows them to control crowd flow. So we opt into that because it makes our life more convenient while we're at Disney. Would I want to be have Disney track me right now? No. That would be super creepy. But realistically, when I've got my GPS on my phone, someone might be tracking me. There might be stuff going on right now. And Waze uses that technology. And that's how they get smart information on the roads, is they're tracking us all the time when we opt in to use Waze. So, it's a very interesting, I think the notion of privacy in digital is just an evolving thing. Part of it is we're not going to have real privacy unless we go off the grid. And I don't plan to do that anytime soon. maybe one day. So I think there's an issue around that. Now your question is, should companies do this? I think they just have to be really thoughtful and prepared. They have to set I think the best strategy is set your own governance policy before it really comes down. So you can say, this is how we're going to use it. And we want to be good stewards of that and honor our customers in that. But also with employees too. I don't think this trend is going on as much now, but you've probably heard of it, the BYOD, bring your own device. And so rather than companies, and the retailers did a lot of this, so rather than them buying thousands of iPads for their clerks and folks working in their stores to be able to show product and purchase, they say bring your own phone and we'll load the apps on your phone so then you can purchase for customers. But now you've got customer data on your phone. So the company's saving money, but now they've just loaded customer data on your phone. Where's the line in that? It's an interesting, messy topic. So there's another more. We're just figuring this out. I don't know.
Yeah, and then also now, what, security measures then, obviously organizations will need to beef up their security measures. Then now, the bring your own device thing, what else do they need to consider,
So when you think about this, what are the things you think about? What do you worry about or concerned about, or where do you see the line?
I just don't know what they're doing with my data.
Lots of things, Christina.
Right. And then where is my information ultimately going? And will this somehow come back at me one way or another down the road that I'm going to regret? I don't know. And when customers or consumers opt in, do we really understand what that means? What opt-in means? Yeah, we have a little, acknowledgement you sign off on.
That no one reads.
That nobody reads.
We just accept.
Yes.
I just want to get to the website, or I want to get to the app, or whatever.
So again, our organizations and consumers and customers, are we doing our due diligence in this space? Are we as consumers and customers reading, and also our organizations educating?
Yeah. So that's another flip to this digital thing, is on the customer side. Yeah, messy.
I feel like we opened more questions then.
I think you're right. And we're about to go to my last question for you about the life hack, but I'll end with this comment. I had lunch with someone yesterday. He works in a large company, and they're more on the consulting advisory side, but he said he was stunned. He'd come from another large company that was having some issues, and they were clearly on the downward side of the growth curve, if you follow me. Big, well-named company, and it's kind of a sad story. He got to this other company, and he said, oh my gosh, this company really embraces technology, embraces digital. They have bots that are doing a lot of things that are automated, that are back office stuff, and they're getting really smart with this. And he said, it's really cool. It's also really frightening. If this trend continues, we could see a 40% unemployment rate, because there's a lot of functions that can be automated. Automated. Tax services, dental services. I mean, you could really go down the chain and really automate a lot of things. And pretty soon, what does that mean for us? What do we do with that? Now, I don't think that's going to happen in the next 20 years, but maybe. He said, and he ended by saying the technology's there. It's just a question of using it, which is a little frightening.
Yes, and that's when you had asked me in the beginning, what does it take to get leaders or to change their minds? Showing them that the technology is there. It's just that we have not used it.
Yeah.
We're not using it.
But then there's a lot of implications.
Correct.
We get more efficient, but we're going to lay off a lot of people.
Yep.
And is that what we want to do? And is that the right thing? And how do we do that?
Yeah.
Messy.
Many questions.
So speaking of messy, you're gonna help us put it all together by giving us a life hack. What's your one life hack for how we can make our lives a little less dysfunctional, either personally or professionally?
With all the recent natural disasters happening, and just a lot of families being displaced and everywhere, and just I personally know of a couple of people being affected, and one of the things I think that I take for granted for sure is telling my loved ones every day that I love them.
Nice.
So because you never know what's going to happen, next day, a couple weeks from now. So I, now make it a point every time when I end a conversation on the phone or, whatever it may be in person, that I always end the conversation with "I love you," because, want to make sure that person knows that I love them. It's a little
awesome.
Cheesy, but
I love it. I love that. I love that. Could you use that anywhere? Could I go through the bank teller and they deposit my check? I'm like, thank you. I love you.
You can say, "I appreciate you."
I appreciate you. It'd be a little creepy if I said I love you. It would be. That's a great life hack.
But just showing love to everyone that around you and appreciating them.
Yeah. So we started with digital and we ended very, very relational.
Yes.
That was a nice kind of nice arc. Christina, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
For coming. This was fantastic.
Thank you.
So if people wanted to learn more about you or connect with you, where could they go?
I could be found on LinkedIn. Not exactly sure what my URL is, but I'm sure if you search Christina Ambrose, I will show up on there. And or you can search me via the Vanderbilt or Emory network, or on Facebook as well, or Instagram.
Awesome.
So,
awesome. Thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening. Keep up the fight against dysfunction every week. And of course, you can join us on this show at theworkplacetherapist.com. And of course, follow us on Facebook.com/Brandon Smith at the WPT Therapist. And until next week, have an awesome week and an awesome life.